أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وارزقنا فهم النبيين وحفظ المرسلين اللهم افتح لنا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So Alhamdulillah, welcome everyone. I think session 14, and inshallah our core topic of discussion today is going to be around the intellect and intelligence. So the section from the text we'll be looking at is titled متى يحجب القلب عن مطالعة عالم الملكوت. When is the heart يحجب, veiled, from seeing the unseen realms, the spiritual realms? When is it veiled? And we say that primarily the inroad of knowledge coming to the heart from the realm is through the senses, through the brain, and then through the intellect. So this is now going to be our central point. We'll be looking at this. So I want to start off by first explaining what are thoughts. Thoughts and these ideas and how they are formulated and where they originate from. So could you share the diagram, please? Thank you. We say that when we talked about vice and virtue, we looked at the concepts themselves. We say that man is inherently of a goodly creation, right? Which goes against what the Christian doctrine holds about mankind, that man is originally a sinner, which is false as far as Islam is concerned. Just scroll through. Next, yeah, right there. No, that one, yeah. So man is originally of a good nature, which means that his very nature, his inclination is towards good. And so the opposite of that is something that pulls him away from good. And this is what we call evil. Evil being a capitulation. Evil is not a choice. So khayr in Arabic, khayyara yukhayyiru, means to choose good. It doesn't just mean good, neither does it mean choose. It means to choose good, which means on a deeper level, the choice that we're making in life, as far as our will is concerned, is not really a choice between good and evil. It's not a choice between the two. This is just what we express in the colloquial sense. Because you're not presented with a choice between good and evil. What you're presented with is a circumstance in which you either choose to be good, yani to do a good deed or a righteous action, or you refrain from that and hence capitulate or give in to evil. So inherently man is of a good nature, and that's his disposition. And that's what the central core there, you can see the heart, qalb. One of the meanings of qalb is the core, the centermost, the innermost dimension. You've got 4 types of thoughts that come into the heart. You've got what are known as Rabbaniya, thoughts that are Rabbaniya, divine inspirations, which are pure. And then you've got Malaikiya, which are angelic inspirations, and these are good, they're moral, they have certainty with them, and they are virtuous. Then you've got demonic whisperings, Shaitaniya, which are evil and wicked and doubtful. These are where the vice comes from that. And then you've got nafsiya thoughts, which are from the self, volitions of the self. These are egotistical, egocentric. These are your appetites, your carnal desires. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. He has proportioned the soul and then given it or inspired it with vice and with virtue. Which means as concepts, these are not objects. Vice and virtue are not objects, they're not tangible entities. They are concepts that have been inspired into the human being so that he is aware and is able to identify which is which. And is able to do this firaq between them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends guidance to enable the human being to do this firaq. And this is why one of the names of the Quran is Al-Furqan. It is the criterion by which to distinguish right and wrong. فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا قَدْ أَفْلَهَا مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. Surely the one who succeeds, the successful one, is the one who purifies the soul, purifies it. وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. The loser is the one who prevents that choice of good being enacted. So dasa in its root form means to drive a wedge, to create an obstacle, to prevent something from doing what it's supposed to do. That is what dasa means. So the capitulation of evil is the soul preventing the heart from achieving what its innate quality is. And we said last week about the disease, which is a thing that prevents or that incapacitates the natural quality of a thing. So if the natural quality of the heart is to believe and to seek out truth, then a diseased heart, a disease is preventing it from fulfilling its natural quality. Now, the way this is built, because this is a world of circumstance, which is a world of causes and effects, you will be faced with circumstances which require you to consume food, to consume drink, to copulate for the sake of the longevity of you as a human being and your species. Or you can be faced with a circumstance in which you are required to react in a certain way, react or in defense against hostility, you are provoked. So long as these characteristics, because they themselves have been assembled in you, this is what Ghazali said in the first chapter, they have been assembled in you in order to facilitate your journey through this life. So they're there as instruments. So long as you use these in the right limits and the right boundaries, then they will give you success. They will enable you, as he said, that happiness is built on three things. All these three things, the intellect, the concupiscence, and the irascibility, you need to execute these in the right manner. So long as they are executed on two premises, this is my identification of it, two premises. So long as they are executed on two premises, they would be considered praiseworthy and they will contribute to the mental well-being of the individual. The first is that they must be executed within the ordained parameters of sound reason and intellection. And these ordained parameters is the ordinance that comes to mankind through the one who is chosen from mankind, a prophet or a messenger. And so it is upon you, the individual, to recognize who this individual is and to follow the ordinance that this individual has been sent to deliver to you. This is the prophet. The second premise is that for this ordinance to be properly comprehended and executed, the directive of it must come from the heart to the intellect, not from the intellect to the heart. So if the heart recognizes that it does not know what the ordinance is, or it does not comprehend the ordinance, then it must approach that ordinance from that perspective. If the individual uses the intellect to then bring out the ordinance and put it on the heart, then what you're essentially doing is placing the light of reason over the light of revelation. In other words, you are projecting a preconceived notion on the ordinance. This is where people make a monumental, fundamental flaw when it comes to the Holy Quran. They look at the text, but instead of understanding what the text itself is saying, they already project a prior understanding that they have from elsewhere onto the text. And then they say, oh, this is what the Quran is saying, or this is what Allah is saying. But that is where the mistake lies. As even Imam al-Ghazali said in the beginning sections, that the divine speech is meant for the heart. It's not meant for the intellect. The intellect is just an instrument that will be used in comprehension of it. The heart is the one that recognizes whether or not it knows or it does not know. If it knows, then it has an understanding. If it does not know, then it must make the effort to execute the intellect and use it as an instrument to come to know. This is why the Quran itself gives you a directive: ask those who know if you do not know. Don't make the attempt yourself, because you don't know where the source is coming from. And that source could be from either of these four places. It could be from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He'll give you inspiration. That's there. And no one is eliminated from that. Everyone gets divine inspiration from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's going to talk about that. I think we'll look at that next week. Or it could be from angelic suggestions, inspirations from the angels that give you a little bit of a prompt to do something good. Or it could be from the demons who are giving you these whisperings and you're not sure whether it's true or not true. But most of it is going to come from the self. The bulk of all thought for the human being comes from the volition of the self. And so the self might go in and you might look at this ordinance and think that you are interpreting it correctly, when in fact you are actually just projecting your own understanding of it to derive what's working for you. So this is what people do, is they'll look at the ayat and then they'll take out what works for them. And you'll see it in Surah Al Imran, ayah number 3, I believe. Look at the whole ayah, and you will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells those who have a perversion in their hearts, they will look at these ayat which are ambiguous, they are vague, they are metaphoric. They have no knowledge on how to understand them, but they will leave the what's known as the heart of the book, the ayat muhkam, and they will leave that, and they will look at only those that are ambiguous, because the ambiguity can be manipulated this way, that way, and then they'll derive meanings that suit them, that work for them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says then, Tilka hudud Allah. These are the parameters in which He has sent. This whole criterion, this kitab, the ordinance that He sent down. These are the parameters of sound intellection. These are the boundaries. وَمَن يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ يُدْخِلْهُ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِن تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا وَذَلِكَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. Whoever follows the ordinance, that person will be granted the ultimate contentment of paradise. That's where they will abide for eternity. And that is success. That is true success. وَمَن يَعْصِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَيَتَعَدَّ حُدُودَهُ يُدْخِلْهُ نَارًا خَالِدًا فِيهَا وَلَهُ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. Whoever then goes against that, against what Allah and His Messenger have sent down, have given you, and you breach the boundaries. You see, intellection now has become something that looks towards breakthroughs, to break through certain boundaries. Well, I'm going to talk about that in a bit. You breach the boundaries, you do not recognize that there are limits to intellection. Then that individual, that person is being damned. That person now is going to be the occupant of hellfire, and that's where they will abide for an eternity with humiliating punishment. So, now let's look at this section, and then I will expand a little bit further on that. Where is it? Okay, I'll keep that inside. Now, so he says, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ مَا مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا وَيَدْخُلُ فِي قَلْبِهِ الْخَاطِرَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ وَبَيَانُ الْحَقِّ عَلَى سَبِيلِ الْإِلْهَامِ. There is none, no one, except that there enters his heart righteous and divine thought and inspiration, and the articulation of truth enters their heart by way of inspiration, by way of ilham. Every single individual on the planet, every single human being is privy to that tiny window. Whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses to open it for them, is privy to this divine inspiration, such that it enters into the heart and the truth is articulated to them. Now, it all depends on whether or not they recognize it. وَذَلِكَ لَا يَدْخُلُ مِنْ طَرِيقَ الْحَوَاسِ. And this does not come through the mannerism of the senses. It's not something that you will see physically or smell or taste or touch or feel or hear. It's not going to come through this outward world. It will be thrust directly into the heart from the spiritual realms. بَلْ يَدْخُلُ فِي الْقَلْبِ. Rather, it enters into the heart. لَا يَعْرِفُ مِنْ أَيْنَ جَاءَ. The individual will not know where it has come from. He will not be able to distinguish that. Except for those who have a sound heart, they will realize, they will understand that this is from divinity. But a majority of mankind, they will have these premonitions, these epiphanies, they'll have these strange dreams, they'll see something amazing, or they'll see something that happens maybe further down, in the future, and then they'll be like, oh, I had this in a dream, or something of the sort. Things like, Saif had asked last time about deja vu, right? And I said I might talk about that a little bit. To understand something like that, first of all, you have to cross out that word. That word, you have to remove that from your vocabulary in order to understand it, because that word carries certain connotations that are projections, their meaning. It's a made-up word, right? It's not an original term. It's not a scholastic term. It's not an academic term. It's a made-up word to describe a phenomenon that the human being experiences that just gives them this sort of a lapse. They're sort of slightly, very briefly, sort of disconnected from this material reality. So you see something happening, and then you get this feeling that, oh, it's already happened before, or something of the sort, or it can even be over a duration of time, like you've seen it long time ago, it had happened before, and now it's happening again in the same exact manner or the same thing. So this sort of feeling, this phenomenon, is something that is experienced by the heart in a spiritual space, not in a material space. That's why I said you need to let go of that definition and every theory that comes from that direction, because that's not what it is. Because it's much more expansive than just seeing something happen twice. The understanding, the seeing here is not the seeing of the senses. It is a seeing of the heart, or a realization of the heart from a spiritual dimension. And this is why when they receive these kinds of moments, when they experience these kinds of moments, they don't know where it's coming from, and they can't explain it. They cannot articulate where it's coming from. لِأَنَّ الْقَلْبَ مِنْ عَالَمَ الْمَلَكُوتِ. Because the heart is from the spiritual realms. You can stop sharing that. I can see it's still on. لِأَنَّ الْقَلْبَ مِنْ عَالَمَ الْمَلَكُوتِ. Because the heart is from the spiritual realms. وَالْحَوَاسْ مَخْلُوقَةٌ لِهَذَا الْعَالَمِ عَالَمَ الْمُلْكِ. And the senses are creations of this realm, which is the realm of the mulk, the material realm, the domain now. So the heart is from a different realm, and the senses are from a different realm. What you think you're experiencing of the senses is not actually what it is. What you're experiencing is from the side of the malakut. That deja vu that you're thinking you experienced, you've seen this before, you've seen some imagery taking place, certain components have come and have triggered a memory of something similar in association that has taken place. That experience is not an experience of this world. It's an experience of alam al-malakut. فَلِذَلِكَ يَكُونُ حِجَابُهُ عَنْ مُطَالَعَةٍ ذَلِكَ الْعَالَمِ إِذَا لَمْ يَكُنْ فَارِغًا مِنْ شُغْلِ الْحَوَاسِ. For this reason, the individual is veiled from that realm, alam al-malakut. if they are not freed from the chains and the links of the senses. This is what we call clinging to causality. You see, people look for the truth, but they're looking for the link between the cause and the effect, or they're looking for the cause to the effect that has taken place. So something has happened, and they're trying to figure out what happened, and they're trying to find the link to the cause as it pertains to that effect. This is called clinging to causality. Ibn Ajiba says in his tafsir of Surah Al-Kahf about haqiqah. Remember we talked about al-waqi'iyah and then al-haqiqah. So al-waqi'iyah is something that is of a realistic nature of this realm here, and you can find the causes and effects. You can link, you see, a cause to an effect. If I take this hand and do this, right? This hand coming this way, this is the cause of that sound, right? So that sound is of a material nature because it is moving, the sound waves are moving through a material medium, through the air in this case, to reach you via the microphone, which is vibrating. That's a material medium, and then electrical signals that are delivered to you. Ultimately, it is all of a material medium, right? But so that's the cause, that's the effect, the sound, and this is the cause. So you can establish that insofar as al-waqi'iyah is concerned. As a fact, this happened. Now, what's underlying that? People never look at that. They never think about that. Why did I do that? If you break off from the causes and effects, you actually come to realize that there are no causes and effects. In truth, there are no causes and effects. What there are variables and conditions. See, certain variables had to be in place. Like the microphone had to be working for you to hear that sound. You see, the force that I exerted had to be just right for you. If I did it like this, you wouldn't hear it, right? The force had to be exerted at a certain amount for you to hear that sound. There had to be an intent behind that action. For me to do that action, there had to be an intent. All of that is part of the unseen realm. It's not part of the seen realm. So yeah, sorry, I was saying, Ibn Ajiba says on that, haqiqah in this case, al-haqiqah khafiyatun an absar al-mustamsikina al-asbab al-adiyah. That haqiqah, reality now, true reality is concealed, is hidden, is veiled from the sights of those who cling to a causal reality. Al-asbab al-adiyah are what you call nominal causes. Like this is a nominal cause. This is why when we look at things and events that have happened, we try to figure out why they happened. We only look at the facts, and those facts can be interpreted in either way. This is called subjective reasoning. You're just looking at the surface of things. But the reality of it is hidden from you because you're not able to see with your senses what's unseen behind that. Your intelligence needs to be advanced a little more. It needs to move from active to, from agent to active. I'll talk about this in a bit. So he's veiled, the individual is veiled from the unseen realm because he is stuck, he's chained to the sensory realm. He is reliant entirely on what his senses are picking up as a source of knowledge or as a source of knowing. So in this next section he says, Mata yattala al-qalb alam al-malakut. So when does the heart see the spiritual realms? So that section is when is the heart veiled from it? It's veiled from the spiritual realms when the individual is clinging to this realm. And the senses are preventing him. He's highly reliant on his senses. So, when does he see the spiritual realms then? وَلَا تَظُنَّنَّ أَنَّ هَذِهِ الطَّاقَةَ تَنْفَتِحُ بِالنَّوْمِ وَالْمَوْتِ فَقَط. Don't assume then, in this case, that this potential of seeing the unseen, not with your senses, but with your heart, is not limited to only the prophets and the saints. Is not limited to only sleep or death, because when you sleep, as he said, the senses are cut off. When you go to sleep, the door of the senses is shut. So you have detached from the senses and you are in a spiritual dimension. Or when you die, in this case, you're cut off from the body realm and you are now in a spiritual dimension. So it's not limited to that. You can still have an understanding of the unseen while you're alive in this world. بل تنفتح باليقظة لمن أخلص الجهاد والرياضة. Rather, it can be opened up in the wakeful state to those who are striving and who are sincere in their struggle and their spiritual exercise is what I've translated now. وتخلص من يد الشهوات والغضب والأخلاق القبيحة والأعمال الرديئة. And those who are freed from the concupiscence and the irascible nature and the vile qualities and the wicked actions. When you are now freed from this, because the caprice in this case, the capitulation of it, it's like a magnet. In my book, The Understanding Ghazali's Alchemy of Happiness, I don't know which chapter it is in, I give the allegory of the human being like iron and this world, this dunya, like a magnet that's fixed. You see, the evil, right? Evil in this case is like a magnet that's fixed to this dunya. So you're being drawn in, you're being pulled every single time. You're being pulled because evil has an objective. It has an agenda. Evil. Good does not have an agenda. Good is inclined directly towards the divine presence. So simply choosing to do good automatically gives you a raise, an ascension. But evil is something that has got an agenda because it wants to dasa, it wants to prevent you. You see? So it will draw you towards this realm. And so long as you're drawn to this realm, you will not be able to rise to the higher dimensions of the malakut. So this potential of being able to understand the spiritual, to understand, because it's not something you can articulate in words. And he's going to talk about that in a bit. To understand this, you have to detach from this dunyawi world. And in the science of tasawwuf, there are essentially 3 steps to doing that. And they follow the 3 letters of Jim, Ha, and Kha, which is very interesting. So you have takhliya, you have tahliya, and then you have tajliya. So takhliya is to empty yourself, takhalla, to empty yourself. So the Prophet ﷺ, he was emptying himself in the cave. He was ridding himself from the affiliations and the norms and the customs and the practices and the decadence of his people at the time, which were dunyawi, which is very interesting as far as Arab history is concerned. During that age, every civilization believed in an afterlife except the Arabs. It's a very interesting thing. Every civilization believed in the afterlife except the Arabs. They didn't believe in that you could die and then be brought back to life. So all their perception, and you can see this in Jahili poetry, all their perception of reality was material perception. They only believed that immortality could be gained if you left behind a legacy and poems were written about you. That's how they codified their immortality. So the emptying, first of all, is to empty the self. To get rid of this, you have to break the self of its volitions, the things that you like, the things that you are attracted to, the things that draw you. You know, the designer clothes and the things, the perfumes and the devices and the latest this and the latest that. All those material things that are very alluring. You like them, they're very nice. And that does not mean, by the way, that you completely deprive yourself of it. No, because as far as now Sharia is concerned, you are allowed to have some enjoyment in them. But the idea here is not to get attached to those things. You see, you can still buy yourself good things and get yourself nice things and adorn yourself with these and your home and everything, but not to get attached to them. So that now all your thoughts are bent towards seeking out means in which you can achieve those things. This is where the world mostly functions in, right? The career and the ambition and all the goals in life are geared towards making more money so that you can spend that money and acquire those things. And then there is tahliya, which is hulwa, it's like to sweeten now, right? Halwa is sweet. So it's now to sweeten it. So you empty yourself of these caprices and you fill yourself with good to now really beautify yourself. So you're removing all these external beauties and you're beautifying your inward now. And then comes tajliya. This is where you now get the opening from. Once you've adorned yourself with the sweet and the beautiful, the husn, that's when you now get the opening. As he said before, in time, the robe of honor will descend upon you. Out through this hard work, through this perseverance. So he says, فَإِذَا جَلَسَ فِي مَكَانٍ خَالٍ. So now, if you sit now, after you've done this detachment, you've gotten rid of all these things, you've mentally prepared yourself to be detached from these things. If you sit now in an empty place without distractions, وَعَطَّلَ طَرِيقَ الْحَوَاسِ, and you suspend the functionalities and the mannerisms of the senses. You're not seeing, you're not looking at things, you're not listening to things, you're not talking, you're not eating, you're not doing all these things. وَفَتَّحَ عَيْنُ الْبَاطِنِ وَسَمْعُهُ, and you open, and he opens his inner eye and his inner hearing. It's not hearing with the ears, it's listening to that inner voice now and seeing with the inner sight. This is what you call meditation, but meditation in the Islamic way. And it's not the meditation of the Sufi with, banging your chest and doing oh, and all these things with the lights turned off. That's a bit on the extreme side. This is more like you alone personally. وَقَالَ دَائِمًا Allah, Allah, Allah بِقَلْبِهِ دُونَ لِسَانِهِ. And he says, Allah, 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 always, with his heart, not his tongue. With your heart, you're just there, you're in peace and you're in quiet, you've cut off from and you've detached yourself mentally and physically, and you take that moment by yourself, and this is all your focus. You put all your focus on the remembrance of Allah now. True dhikr. إِلَىٰ أَن يَصِيرَ لَا خَبْرَ مَعَهُ مِن نَفْسِهِ وَلَا مِنَ الْعَالَمِ. Until he becomes detached or unacquainted himself, his self becomes detached from itself. The self becomes detached from the self. In the Sufiya tradition, this is called fana, which I don't really go for that because I don't know, just there's nothing to really substantiate, even theoretically. So, but that's what they call it, like you annihilate yourself, because the Sufiya believe that yourself is your worst enemy. So it's basically destroying yourself. One of the hadith, which is there, it's a hadith, jihad against the self, or kill yourself before you die, die before you die, sort of, I thought. But the concept is sound. You detach yourself from the volitions of the self, وَلَا مِنَ الْعَالَمِ, and also from the world, from the realm, from this material world. You detach yourself from yourself, from your volitions, from your khawatir, your thoughts, the inclinations. You break off from all of this, which is it's not an easy thing to do, by the way. What he's talking about is something that you would perfect as such as a practice, but it's something that you have to sort of try and keep trying and then be consistent with it. وَيَبْقَى لَا يَرَى شَيْئًا إِلَّا اللَّهِ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى وَيَبْقَى لَا يَرَى شَيْئًا إِلَّا اللَّهِ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى انفتحت تلك الطاقة. And he realizes nothing except Allah, glorified and exalted is He, and thus this potential then opens up to him. وَأَبْصَرَ فِي الْيَقَظَةِ الَّذِي يُبْصِرُهُ فِي النَّوْمِ. And then he sees in his wakeful state what he sees in his sleep. This is now where the harmonization comes in. The harmonization of what you experience in this outward realm with the harmonization of what you experience in your dreams. You're now able to correlate the two. what you see in your dreams and what you are doing in this outward world. What your actions are and what the intentions formulated in your heart are. Now you are able to connect the two together to make sense of it. فَتَظْهَرُ لَهُ أَرْوَاحُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ وَالْأَنْبِيَاءِ وَالصُّوَرُ الْحَسَنَةِ الْجَمِيلَةِ. And he then sees the essences of the angels and the prophets and these forms of virtuous beauty. You're not able to understand what the prophetic essence is, what it means to be an angel, to embody an angelic spirit. In other words, you're now able to see the world as it truly is, not as being told what it is. Being told what the world is or what reality is like is different from you actually seeing it and experiencing it yourself. وَانْكَشَفَ لَهُ مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And then unveiled to him now are the dominions of the heavens and the earth. وَرَأَى مَا لَا يُمْكِنُ شَرْحُهُ وَلَا وَصْفُهُ. And he then sees what cannot be explained or articulated or described. There are no words that can describe that, what you then understand. You can't put it into terms. This is why one of the things philosophers they have a very hard time with is in articulation. They cannot simplify. That's why when you read a book on philosophy or a philosophical work, it's very confusing. It's very confounding. There are words compounded upon words trying to explain, a simple concept. Or I would not say a simple, it would be a simple concept, but then its articulation is so sophisticated because you're trying to explain something that is not of this world. It's a very difficult thing to do when somebody comes to understand that. This is why you've got, like the Prophet ﷺ, see, he was given the comprehensive word. He was given the kind of word that contained all this information packed into it. But then from those few words, like the simplest you could look at, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ is usually the first hadith recorded in all the books. That statement alone, you could have countless commentaries written on it. Volumes being written just on that one statement. Because it's a simple concept. You understand the concept, but you can't articulate it. It's a very difficult and sophisticated thing to express in words. And you're seeing something now, you're seeing the reality of the alam al-malakut. There are no words that can articulate that. This is why the Quran stands prime above any linguistic compilation. Because the words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen for the Quran, they closest resemble reality. And the Quran itself, speech of Allah, kalamullah, comes from outside this realm. It comes from beyond the alam al-malakut. You see, it's got knowledge in it that you cannot express in words. This is why the words themselves chosen are just remarkable. For anyone who understands the Arabic language and looks at the Quran, you just have to marvel at its compilation. Like nobody can actually think of articulating the way the Quran articulates. Logically sound, rhetorically sound, grammatically 100% correct. Every test that you put to the Quran, it passes without difficulty, which is amazing, subhanAllah. كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم زويت لي الأرض حتى رأيت مشارقها ومغاربها. The earth was folded up for me that I could see its horizons, its easts and its wests. وقال الله عز وجل وكذلك نري إبراهيم ملكوت السماوات والأرض وليكون من الموقنين. And thus Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, and thus did we show Ibrahim the dominions of the samawat and the ard, that he would become among those who have yaqeen. And this is where the finality of it is. The yaqeen is what you are now looking for. Because psychologically, what did we say? At the very root level is an epistemological crisis. And what is an epistemological crisis? You have a problem or an equation that's not adding up. You can't get a conclusion out of it. You've got variables that you don't know of that are required to solve that equation. You've got conditions that need to be in place in order for you to resolve the problem. There's too much going on that you cannot come to a resolution, and it's causing an imbalance within you, such that imbalance then manifests into any kind of psychological illness. To resolve the epistemological crisis, what's the individual looking for? What's the heart looking for when it combines faith and knowledge? Ma'rifah, not ilm, ma'rifah. When it combines the two, it is looking for certainty, yaqeen. That certainty is what resolves the crisis. This ayah, if you look at it and you look at the subsequent ayats following that, is what Ibrahim alayhi salam goes through then. He looks at the stars, he says, this is my Lord, and then that assumption is nullified. Then he looks at the moon, this is my Lord, the assumption is nullified. Then he looks at the sun, this is my Lord, the assumption is nullified. What is he looking for? What is he searching for? See, where did he come from prior to that? That was causing him distress is what he saw the practice of his people and his father. And it's a deep psychological question that the individual asks. See, who am I? Where have I come from? Either I've come from nothing or something put me here. That if I'm intelligent, then this something must be more intelligent. If I'm a created thing, then this must be the creator, and that's whom we are looking for. That's ultimately who you're looking for. Because this is existence, right? This is wujud. And you found existence here. So you're looking for something that made this existent. You're looking for the one who originated everything. And so he's going through this, it's causing him distress, it's causing him a crisis, until he then comes to this understanding, this unveiling, this opening. Why? Because his heart was pure. Because his heart was pure, he was able to receive this opening. And of course, because he was a prophet, but aside from that, it's because his heart was pure, he received this opening. And thus he was able to have now the yaqeen that would put him in a sound psychological state. لأن علوم الأنبياء عليهم السلام كلها كانت من هذا الطريق لا من طريق الحواس. Because the knowledge of the prophets, of the Anbiya, is from this mannerism. It's not from the mannerism of the senses. See, the prophets do not learn the way we learn. You'll find this in my book, The One-Eyed Impostor, chapter 4 or 5, on prophecy and prediction. There's a section there explaining prophetic knowledge, just in brief. See, the prophets do not learn the way we learn. See, we have to learn through the books, and we need somebody of our own peer, another human being, to teach us the mannerisms or the knowledge, to teach us how to abstract reality, to abstract an understanding from reality. The prophets do not learn the way we learn. Their understanding, number one, is an absolute understanding because it's directly from the truth. Their understanding is an understanding of certainty because, again, it's from the same source. And they have a window, an open window that the rest of mankind are not privy to. That knowledge is coming directly from a divine source. It's not tuitive knowledge. They don't have to go through tuition and education. It is an intuitive knowledge. كما قال سبحانه وتعالى واذكر اسم ربك وتبتل إليه تبتيلا. Remember the name of your Lord. This is what when he said about you sit alone and you close off the rest of the dunya and you only, remember Allah through your heart, not through your tongue or whatever. That's what he's evidencing here. وَاذْكُرِ اسْمَ رَبِّكَ وَتَبَتَّلْ إِلَيْهِ تَبْتِيلًا. Remember the name of your Lord. Devote to Him with complete devotion. In other words, in order for you to go to your Lord, you have to detach from other than your Lord. In order for you to draw closer to Allah, you need to let go of anything that is other than Allah. معناه الانقطاع عن كل شيء وتطهير القلب من كل شيء والابتهال إليه سبحانه وتعالى بالكلية. This means detach from everything and purify the heart from everything and beseech it to your Lord, glorified be He, with your entire being. Complete devotion. Not a little bit here and a little bit there. Not when I feel like it. This is there in our practice and in our habits. You hear the adhan, wait, let me finish this and finish that and finish the other one, and then I'll pray, right? Because they'll bring out the fiqh argument. Yeah, but see, I can pray, it's not yet. Yeah, see, like 1 hour, see, the asr is not yet there, so I can pray at this time. I say I can wait until this, Isha, you can pray the whole night, right? So why pray at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock when the adhan is done? I can pray at 12 o'clock. See, these are excuses of the self. If your Lord has called you to it, break from whatever it is you're doing. It's not about, I'm now, a holy person. That's why I do. No, it's about yourself. Because here's the thing. You cannot expect your Lord to give you priority when in your life He is just an option. Do not expect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you priority when in your life He is an option. And you can just basically shuffle things around this way or that way. Because you're busy with this, or you're busy with work, or you're busy with other things. If it's a circumstance, it's understandable. This is why the Sharia gives you this leeway. But if it's not a circumstance that is of an urgent nature, then don't make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala an option. If you are going to devote to Him, then devote to Him with your entire being. Give it your fullest. وَهُوَ طَرِيقَ الصُّوفِيَّةِ فِي هَذَا الزَّمَانِ. This is the way of the people of tasawwuf. This is what the people, it's not about all this dhikr and wearing a green turban and I can see the jinn in the air and these kind of things. True tasawwuf is true devotion, sincere devotion. Sidi Zarruq says the only true definition of tasawwuf that you can render is sincerity towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam al-Nawawi in the first hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, he says, it's about sincerity. It's about true ikhlas. وَأَمَّا طَرِيقَ التَّعْلِيمِ فَهُوَ طَرِيقَ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Now here, this is what he's giving you are the kinds of or the levels of intelligence. So let me go through this and then I'll explain in detail. So the first one is, this is the tariqah of the people of tasawwuf. وَأَمَّا طَرِيقَ التَّعْلِيمِ, as for the path of learning, فَهُوَ طَرِيقَ الْعُلَمَاءِ, this is the methodology of the ulama, the scholars. وَهَذِهِ الدَّرَجَاتُ الْكَبِيرَةُ مُخْتَصَرَةٌ مِنْ طَرِيقَ النُّبُوَّةِ. And this is a great rank. The collaboration of these two is a great rank abridged from the prophetic rank. So Sidi Zarruq says about that the Sufi must have a fiqh. You cannot be a Sufi when you have got no fiqh, no aqidah, none of that. You've just suddenly become enlightened, like because you followed this sheikh and he followed his sheikh and so on and so forth. And the faqih must have tasawwuf. Because what's the point of you studying the Sharia when you don't understand its implementation? It's not just about what's right and wrong and haram and halal. It's about the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law. The letter of the law is a guide. The spirit of the law is the embodiment of it. So you need to have this spirituality as well. You see? And both of these have to go together and are impossible without iman. And that's the abridgment from the prophetic path, because all the prophets, they came with a theme. They came with a theme of 3 components: Tawheed, Nubuwah, and Akhirah. This is the theme that all the prophets came with. Tawheed, the unification or realization of one true God. Nubuwa, which is prophecy, that this God can send guidance to you through this link, this conduit called prophecy or prophethood. And then akhirah, meaning that this reality is not the only reality, there is yet another reality to come for which you must cultivate towards. The pillars of Iman are derived from these three components. The pillars of Iman, the 6 tenets, are derived from these three. Tawheed, Nubuwa, and Akhirah. So from Tawheed, you've got Amantu Billah, I believe in Allah. And then from Nubuwa, you've got wa malaikatuhu wa rusuluhu wa kitabu wa kutubuhu. His angels, his messengers, his prophets, and the books, the ordinance that he sends down. Those coming through the channel of Nubuwa. And then Akhirah stands on its own. Those are the 6 tenets. In the first tenet, you have got his qadr. He's in good or in bad. Those are the 6 tenets derived from these 3 things. And this is your Iman, complete your Iman. So these are the levels of intelligence now. So you've got the first level, which is what I call agent intellect. Agent intellect is what you get scientific knowledge from. Through observation, outward observation, the sensorial aspect of learning. You look at the world around you, you observe it, you understand it, and then you build your understanding of the outward domain. I'm going to read from my book, The Understanding Ghazali's Alchemy, and on page 124, if you have, those who have the book. Of these unveilings, there are essentially 4 forms, which correspond to the 4 kinds of intelligences. The first is what we would call agent intelligence, and this is common to everyone. Everyone has this, and this is your level of learning. It is the intelligence that functions on rudimentary form of logic and rationality, by which the knowledge of scientia can be acquired through observation and empirical experience. This is the intellect that requires tangible proof to function, and its power is dependent on what we call scientific knowledge, the deriving of axioms from the realm as it is. If you heat water, it changes its state from liquid to gas. If you cool it, it changes its state from liquid to solid. This is what you learn from the natural world. And these also have their own levels now. So in Kitab al-Ilm, Imam al-Ghazali says now there are 4 stages to this. You've got the first stage, which is what you come with, a priori knowledge, things that you already know that nobody can teach you. These are what you would call first principles or axioms. So in terms of a geometric understanding of the world, a first principle would be that the whole is greater than the part. A complete object is bigger than a part of that object. Nobody teaches you that. You just know it. Children know that. They know that this is bigger than that. Right? 2 objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time. You just know it. No one can teach you that. 1 and 1 is 2. So even though you don't know 1 plus 1 equals 2 as far as the symbolic aspect of it is concerned, or the canonization of it is concerned, you just have an intuitive understanding that this and that is more than just the single one. 1 and 1 is 2. That's your a priori. And then you've got your learning process now, what you would call tuition. You're going through the process of learning. And then you've got now the break now between the agent intellect that breaks into the active intelligence. So a breaking now, a transition now from agent into active. And this is the level of intelligence whereby the individual can evaluate the present to determine accurately outcomes of the present moment. You can look at certain things that are happening now and sort of understand what are the possibilities to a near accuracy of the outcomes of that. So you look at yourself and say, if I do this and this and this is going to happen. If I do this and this and this is going to happen. So you're now in a position whereby you are able to evaluate necessities, necessaries, possibilities, and impossibilities in terms of the world of logic. You see? So you're still part of the agent intellect. This is the scientific mind or the scientific methodology. The unveilings at this level are colloquially termed as discoveries, what we call discoveries. So Newton was sitting, the apple fell on his head, he quote unquote discovered something. He didn't discover anything. He got an unveiling about a certain phenomenon and he understood it. And then he started building a theory out of it to elaborate it further. So the unveilings of this realm, of this level of intelligence, agent intellection, can be articulated because they are part of this world. Because you can name the objects, you can name the things, you can put them in a logical order and argue them out, build the logical argument out of it. Or scientific breakthroughs that provide broader understandings of the logical and physical world. The second is what we would call active intelligence, and this is acquired when the subjective learning process is transformed into an objective understanding. So agent intellection, you might have a PhD, but you're still on the agent level. This is where you call semantic scholars come from. Semantics, they argue semantics. It's all subjective matter to them. You see, so they are focused. They have a speciality in a certain subject, and that's what they'll be arguing within those ranges. They'll just be shuffling around in that. But the active intelligence is now when you have transformed now from a subjective level of understanding into an objective level of understanding. You have activated your intelligence. You have adnahu taraka dunya. You have now detached from the causal world. You're no longer looking at just facts or interpreting facts. You're no longer just clinging or looking for causes to effects. Why did this happen? Because of this. Why did that happen? Because of that. Why did that happen? Because of that. And the chain goes on, right? You're now asking the real question, the why question. You're not just looking at the what and how of things. You're now looking at the why of things. And the why is what gives you an understanding of reality. If you don't probe an inquiry into that, then you are just another link in the chain. You're just part of the chain. You're part of the causation. You have to move above that. Now you can't move above that just like that. You don't just skip. You have to go through the stages, the ranks now. You have to go through the rudimentary level of understanding the axioms, the first level of agent intelligence. Then you have to go through the learning process in order to understand what those axioms are and how they are implemented. Then you have to go into now the break of it in order to now activate the intelligence to be able to now probe a further inquiry into the unknown. This is why in logic, this stage is called min al-ma'loom ila al-majhul. It is from the known into the unknown. You moving from the what and how of things, you're now probing an inquiry into the why of things. You see? So you can examine the facts in history. Hitler killed the Jews and then he tried to conquer the world. Okay, those are the facts. Why did he do it? What are the variables that came in to make that happen? This is what Ibn Khaldun argues. Don't just look at history in terms of facts. Understand the ideologies that made history happen. You see, you have to look at the philosophy behind all that. This is now that level. Active intelligence is where you find philosophical thinking and reasoning. It employs a higher degree of logic and rationality. In other words, you actually understand the science of logic and now you're able to implement it. You're not just functioning by logic. Agent intellection, you'll find a lot of people who have higher education, they have degrees, they have PhDs, but they don't know how logic works. I mean, the very fundamental nature of how the mind functions, they don't know. And they call themselves PhD, doctorate of philosophy. I don't know which philosophy they have. And that's not philosophy. You see, they don't know how. So the philosophy, first of all, there is subjective philosophy, and then there is true philosophy, what we would call philosophia. Philosophia is the love of wisdom, loose direct translation from Greek. Philo, which is the love of, and then Sophia, which is wisdom. That is what you would call in Arabic hubbul hikmah, the love of wisdom. You see, you're moving from the subjective. This is what Ghazali distinguished in his Maqasid al-Falasifa and then his Tahafut al-Falasifa. Sifted out those things that are subjective and focused more on the real benefit of true philosophical thinking and reasoning. So it employs a higher degree of logic and rationality in the contemplation of the nature of reality. You're moving from the logos, which is agent intellection. That's logos. This is where you have all the logi, the subjects, right? Eschatology, epistemology, biology, psychology. This is where you have all the logos. This is logo. And then you have got the ontos now, the nature of reality, from which one may formulate intelligible views and thoughtful opinions. And that's what opinion really means in scholastics. It doesn't mean that everybody just says whatever they're thinking. You know, I have this opinion, that one has that opinion, like that. That's not what opinion really means. An opinion in the Islamic tradition means that, you know, the individual has gone through a vast spectrum of knowledge and understanding now in this case to formulate what they think, to give an opinion on a certain matter. This is the intelligence that functions on sound reason, and its power is dependent on philosophical knowledge. The unveilings at this level pertain now the axioms and the universalities that express the ontological and metaphysical natures of the world. Because you're moving now from particulate understanding, semantics, and then unifying them into universal understandings. You're understanding universal truths. You're understanding the concepts now, regardless of the circumstantial application of those concepts. The third is what we would call spiritual intelligence. And this is acquired when the scientific rationale and the philosophical view is united and subjected to the light of revelation. It thus transcends logic and rationality to the comprehension of a spiritual reality, which itself does not abide by logic and rationality. So you're unifying this. It is sound reason of logic and rationality with philosophical thought. You're unifying it. It has sound reason, but your understanding in this case of a spiritual reality itself, the spiritual reality, does not abide by logic and rationality. This is why you do not project your own thoughts onto revelation. You have to let revelation tell you what it is. This whole idea of people going in and saying, I think this is what the ayah means. I think this is what it means. I think it relates to this thing. Yeah, see, this happened over there. I think this is what the ayah is referring to. You have no idea. You don't know. You're projecting your own thoughts onto revelation. That's not spiritual intelligence. And you cannot, and if you delude yourself into thinking that you've got a spiritual insight, because somehow you are able to connect two symbols together, you are putting yourself into even deeper delusion. This is acquired through the processes of learning and acquiring knowledge paired with devotional practice and religious strife. This is the intellect that functions on spiritual unveiling, and its power is dependent on revealed knowledge. It is dependent on revealed knowledge. You cannot have spiritual insight without revelation giving you that unveiling. The unveilings at this level pertain spiritual insight that articulate the unseen issuances of the alam al-amr and express the realities of this inward world. The fourth is what we would call prophetic intelligence. And this is granted. It is not acquired. It is bestowed upon by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the elite of mankind who are chosen by Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses these individuals as prophets. This is why one of the names of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Al-Mukhtar, the chosen one. These individuals are chosen by Allah, and you will find in the Quran, inshallah we'll do Imam al-Haddad's text, we'll look at the covenant that was made by all of mankind. But then you'll find in the Quran as well, I don't remember in which surah, a separate covenant was made between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the prophets. There was a covenant made, an agreement. Alastu bi rabbikum bala shahidna, with all of mankind, including the prophets. And then there was a separate covenant made by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the prophets. They are chosen for a specific role. To the elite of mankind chosen by God as the emissaries of His ordinance. It is an intelligence that does not acquire knowledge through sensoria, scientia or philosophia. Rather, they, the prophets, have their knowledge thrust into their hearts without mediation, without tuition, without mediation and tuition, by way of inspiration and revelation, wahi, by way of inspiration. The unveilings of this level is exclusive to the prophets, and no other part of creation is privy to them, unless they themselves reveal it. So there are many things that the Prophet ﷺ knew that he did not speak about. There are many understandings from the Quran that he knew that he did not speak about. There are many things that he was privy to that he did not reveal to others. And some things he revealed to us. They are the kind of unveilings that precede and supersede time and space. And this is important because that knowledge is not bound by causality, is not bound by time and space. They might be speaking about something like the Prophet ﷺ, all the prophecies that he gave, it was unknown as to which time that they would occur. You cannot pinpoint them and say, oh, okay, this will happen in 2000 and something. Or this thing happened into this time. You can't do that. You cannot, because the knowledge, and you'll find in those prophecies, especially those that pertain the hour and the signs that would occur, he does not give you a marker of time. He doesn't give you a date, because that knowledge is not bound by time and space, and are of pure truth in the articulation of divine ordinance. It is from these unveilings that prophecies are revealed and from which prophetic wisdom is acquired. For they are gifted with the sight to see that which the rest of mankind is veiled from seeing. Now, this is important. Of the first kind is the path of the scholar. That's what Ghazali is talking about. وَأَمَّا طَرِيقَ التَّعْلِيمِ فَهُوَ طَرِيقَ الْعُلَمَاءِ. That's the first kind. That's agent intellection. Okay? That's the path of the scholar. Of the second is the path of the philosopher. And then the third is the path of the Sufi. The true Sufi. Not the green turban guy. The true Sufi. And the philosopher cannot be called a true philosopher until he has first walked the path of the scholar. The philosopher cannot be called a true philosopher until he has walked the path of the scholar. He's coming up with philosophies and concepts and ideas and this, that, and the other, and probing inquiry into the unknown when he does not have a foundation insofar as the known elements are concerned. You can't go into the unknown until you have the known first. That's why it's called min al-ma'loom ila al-majhul, from the known to the unknown. So you cannot probe an inquiry into why without understanding what and how first. You're trying to understand why, and people are hasty in that sense. You can see this in children a lot. See, they'll keep asking, why is this? Why do we do that? Why is this like this? Yeah? Why did Allah create me like this? You see, they'll ask you these questions, but they cannot understand the why because they don't have the foundational knowledges. They don't understand the what. They don't understand the how yet. And that's acquired through the learning process, the path of the scholar. The education now, in this case. And the Sufi cannot be called a true Sufi until he has walked the path of the scholar and the philosopher. He cannot be called a true Sufi until he has mastered the foundational sciences of the outward aspect, what you would call the exoteric, and then he has then mastered the philosophical understanding of it. Then and then only can he venture into the esoteric. Because there are all these people so in Imam al-Ghazali's deliverance from error, which is Munqidh min ad-dalal, he talks about these. He talks about the mutakallim, he talks about the falasif, he talks about the Sufi, he talks about the batini. The batini is the one who tries to go directly straight into esoterics. This is where you find a lot of conspiracy theorists. They are trying to understand esoteric knowledge, and those who are of an esoteric nature. You see, Freemasons, the Illuminati, and all these things, which are there, and their pathway and the things that they are exploring and they're doing, these are esoterics. But you've got common folk here on this side who are trying to understand that and uncover those conspiracies, which are true. I'm not going to deny those. But you do not have foundational knowledge which will keep you rooted. You do not have a philosophical understanding of true concepts and universals and axioms, and you're going into esotericism. You're going to lose yourself there. And that's where a lot of people, they just get caught up in that, and that's where the phrase comes from, going down the rabbit hole. You know, it's very difficult to come back out. So the Sufi cannot be called a true Sufi until he has walked the path of the scholar and the philosopher. In other words, for you to reach a level of spiritual intelligence, you need to have first mastered agent intelligence, and then broken from agent intellection into active intelligence. You need to activate your intelligence for you to now start rising. Until you do that, you will be stuck on a level of causality. You'll be stuck on this petty level, right? This is where all the politics takes place. You can't do that. You cannot look at the Quran, which is higher above that, and then try to interpret what's happening in the world of politics to come up with a conclusion and then say, oh, it's like this and it's like that. You need to first understand the level of agent intelligence, the learning process. And you don't need to go through university to do that. You can master these sciences by yourself. But you need to then break from that into active intelligence. You need to further your thought into probing an inquiry and trying to seek out an understanding of why things are the way they are. Now, not just on the outward side, in the inward reality as well. Why are these things happening to me? Why am I having this issue? Why is so and so having a negative outlook towards me? You see, why am I having this depression, this anxiety? You need to now seek out that probing of, you need to probe that sort of inquiry within yourself. And only then, after you've got an understanding of that, these first two levels, agent and active, this is the first part of the journey of seeking knowledge. The soul's arrival to meaning. You remember that when I said there are two parts to the journey. The first part is the soul arriving to meaning. You're going through the form, passing through the symbol, and then reaching the level of meaning. Then at that point, you get an opening from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is when meaning now starts arriving to the soul. This is where the light of revelation comes into you to give you this understanding of the other side of reality. Now, the fourth kind is the prophetic path that is walked by the prophets. And this path is unique to them. Peace and blessings be upon them all. The other three can only mimic that path, but can never truly embody it. You cannot be like them. You cannot be like the prophets. You can only mimic that. And this is where you find the sunnah now comes in. You've got the outward sunnah and then you've got the inward sunnah. The outward sunnah, there are many things. How he dressed, how he walked, how he ate, how he spoke, all these things. That's the outward sunnah. Then you've got the inward sunnah, how he conducted himself. His character. When you say the character of the Prophet ﷺ, it does not only pertain the outward. And a lot of people, unfortunately, are stuck on the outward. They can never move into the inward, you know. So you lament at the level of their knowledge and understanding, because it seems that the extent of their knowledge is as far as shaving the mustache is concerned. That's where the extent of their understanding goes. They can't go beyond that. You know, I was at a conference and I met this individual who said he was a scholar, and we were discussing one of my books, The Three Questions, and he was complimenting me on that and the work that I've done, and we had quite a discussion for almost an hour, and then he says to me, brother, you know something? I mean, all this is good and all this is nice and everything, but you know something? The Prophet ﷺ said that you have to trim the mustache and roll up the ankles. And I just stared at the guy and I said, after all that, this is what you can tell me? You couldn't say anything else? This is what you had to pick on? How long my mustache is and my trousers? I'm like, this is just phenomenal. It really explains the pathetic state of scholarship in the Muslim Ummah. Because this is where they are, and they don't realize it, the level of ancient intellection. They just cannot go beyond that. Anyway, but the prophetic character is not just about the outward practice, which has its fada'il, you know, it has its reward, and is a virtuous thing to embody. But more than that is, who was he as a person? How did he behave? How did he relate with others? How did he speak? How did he handle situations? You see, now we can only mimic that. Why? Because we don't have the knowledge that he was privy to. We don't have that understanding that he was given. So we have to go through this process step by step, and we follow the ulama, because the ulama are the inheritors of the prophetic wisdom. This is why we look at so-and-so scholar and so-and-so scholar, and this is so-and-so's this, and this is, you see, we go through that learning and we follow those steps. The other three can only mimic this path but can never truly embody it. For this path can never go astray. See, everyone else, we can go astray. The prophets do not go astray. Even when they make a mistake, that mistake is meant for the purpose of revelation. It is supposed to reveal to you how you can end up going off the track. You see, so even the mistakes that the prophets do, they're not really mistakes. They're free from error in that sense. Speaking on a more existential level, they're free from error in that sense, because even the error that they do is part and parcel of their prophethood. While others can steer away from the truth and even into delusion. For this reason, prophetic intelligence is not only the highest, but is chosen by Allah to be the guide for the rest. The furthest that one can attain is the third kind, which is spiritual intelligence. And this is the rank of the saints. This is the rank of the awliya. That's the furthest that we can attain insofar as our intelligence is concerned. We cannot break that into prophetic intelligence. Now, take all this and put it into perspective to the question that Saif asked last week about artificial intelligence. I'm not going to elaborate further on that. This is your thought now. Put this into perspective and examine now, what is artificial intelligence and where does it sit on this spectrum, regardless of what it can do. And then evaluate yourself in that regard. Where is your intelligence? Which rank is your intelligence on? And how can you advance from the rank that you are in? Okay, we're a bit overboard on time, but let me just finish this. There's a small section remaining here. So, he says, وَكَذَلِكَ عِلْمُ الْأَوْلِيَاءِ لِأَنَّهُ وَقَعَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ بِلَا وَاسِطَةٍ من حضرة الحق. نعم. So وهذه الدرجات وهذه الدرجة الكبيرة مختصرة من طريق النبوة. This is a great rank, this level of spiritual intelligence, the rank of the saints now, that is abridged from the prophetic path, the path of the scholar, and then the path of the one who is on a path of tasawwuf, merged together, is abridged from the prophetic path. وَكَذَلِكَ عِلْمُ الْأَوْلِيَاءِ, and likewise the knowledge of the saints, لِأَنَّهُ وَقَعَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ بِلَا وَاسِطَةٍ مِنْ حَضْرَةِ الْحَقِّ, because it falls into their heart. This is spiritual intelligence now. Revelation is what is giving them an unveiling. They are not taking unveilings or understandings from the world of the senses. They are taking it now directly from revelation, directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ordinance, without mediation from the presence of the truth. كما قال سبحانه وتعالى آتيناه رحمة من عندنا وعلمناه من لدنا علما. He's talking about Al-Khadr, that we gave him, this servant of us, we gave him mercy from us, and we gave him knowledge from us, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the divine source, not from the world of sensoria. And this is why if you examine that recounting in Surah Al-Kahf, it is very interesting, because you've got a prophet of Allah in this case, and then you've got this individual and their understanding of reality, although it is on the surface it looks like there's a clash. You see, on the surface it looks like there's a clash between the two, because he's seeing it from this side and he's seeing it from this side. But then you find that there is a harmonization that takes place beneath the surface. Majma'ul Bahrain, where there is this unification taking place. What he talks about earlier when he says about وَأَبْصَرَ فِي الْيَقَظَةِ الَّذِي يُبْصِرُهُ فِي النَّوْمِ. You then see in your wakeful state, this outward world, what you see in your dream from this inward world. There's a harmonization now that takes place that gives the individual sound psychological states. وَهَذِهِ الطَّرِيقُ لَا تُفْهَمُ إِلَّا بِالتَّجْرِبَةِ. And this tariqah, this mannerism, this pathway cannot be achieved except by rigorous practice. You can't just sit there and expect it to come forward. Tajriba in its root word, yujarribuhu, means to consistently practice, to do something over and over again consistently. You know, jarraba in Swahili, the word is jaribu. So jaribu means to try, to attempt. Jarraba means to try, to constantly attempt or to gain from experience. You know, experiential knowledge. He's going to talk about this briefly as well. It's to make an effort. Now, what's interesting about that, if you look at now on the metaphysics of the language of the word, you have jarraba means to try. If you switch out the ba and the ra, you get jabbara, which means to strengthen, to make something strong. You know, from the same root word you get jababira. Al jababira are the giants, the big people. You know, strong. Jibara means to set a bone in place. You break your bone, then the doctor or the surgeon will set the bone back in place, which is a very painful process. So the process of trying is not an easy process. It's a difficult one, which is why one of the meanings of jabbara is to make an effort. So anything that this is why, like learning a language, it's a difficult thing. It's not an easy thing. You don't just get words in your, and it comes. It's difficult in the early stage, especially when it's a sophisticated language like Arabic or even Turkish. For me, like for example, I'm still learning it. It's not an easy thing. The jabbara, it requires effort, but it requires consistent effort. It's not just you make an effort this week and then 6 months later you try again and it doesn't work. No, it's a consistent effort. You have to do it continuously. And then if you switch out now from jabbara, if you take the ra and bring it in the beginning, you get rajaba, which is also where you get the word rajab from. Rajaba means to be revered or to be in awe of. You see, to have this great. So somebody who's gone through life now, has gone through the trials and the tribulations, has tried this, has tried that, has failed, has gotten back up on their feet, and has strengthened themselves through this journey of life, they are revered as elders. I mean, not so much in today's society, but in prior generations, they are revered as elders. They are the ones who are sought out for their wisdom and their understanding and their sound counsel. To ask them now, the younger generation asks the older generation, what do I do here? Please advise me, please counsel me, because they are revered as elders. You see, this path cannot be achieved except without consistent practice. This is what you call entrainment, psychological entrainment, the learning, the de-learning, the learning, the de-learning. You see, you learn what is beneficial, you de-learn what is erroneous, mistakes. You did something in a certain algorithm and the wrong conclusion came out, you unlearn that and then you relearn a new algorithm. It has to be consistent. It has to be, you have to keep on doing it over and over again. And the same case applies now insofar as you teaching your children. Because if you're going to teach your children, they're learning from you, but you are their guide. And so you have to be consistent in their training, in their entrainment. You try one thing, it doesn't work, you try again, you try something else, and then you maintain the consistency of it. If you break consistency, you will not be able to master it. Practice makes perfect. وَإِن لَمْ تَحْصُلُوا بِالذَّوْقِ لَمْ تَحْصُلُوا بِالتَّعْلِيمِ. That which you do not acquire through taste, you cannot acquire through education. No amount of learning will help you experience this. You can read all the books there are written about spirituality, about the ruh, about the nafs, about all these things. It will not give you an understanding of it until you experience it for yourself, until you implement it for yourself and work on it. No matter of philosophical understanding will come to you regardless of how many books on philosophy you read, until you yourself make an active effort in its understanding. وَالْوَاجِبُ التَّصْدِيقُ بِهَا حَتَّى لَا تُحْرَمَ شُعَاءَ سَعَادَتِهِمْ وَهُوَ مِنْ عَجَائِبِ الْقَلْبِ. And it is vital, very important that you have a conviction in this. You have to believe that this is true and this can work, so that you are not deprived from its felicity and its joy of its experience. And this is from the marvels of the heart. وَهُوَ مِنْ عَجَائِبِ الْقَلْبِ. These are from the marvels of the heart. وَمَنْ لَمْ يُبْصِرُوا لَمْ يُصْدِقُوا. The one who does not see does not believe. Because you need to really experience it. And you have to be able to, because you have to understand first of all that the unveiling, all knowledge is unveiled. Even that which you look outside in reality, that which you read from a book. You could be looking at the words, you know exactly what those words mean, but you simply do not understand what that statement is until the bulb goes off in your head. That's an unveiling. I gave this example, I mean it's a beautiful example of Helen Keller. You really need to, I mean people need to read that, what transpired with her. Because she was blind, right? And then she was deaf. And as a result of that, she could not speak because she wasn't able to acquire language in the natural process that children acquire language. And she just could not understand things because her teacher, Anne Sullivan, was using a technique of the sense of touch. That was the only sense that was really available to her. So she would draw the symbol on one hand and then make her touch and feel the object on the other hand. And she just wouldn't, it was a very frustrating endeavor. Until one time she had water. So Anne Sullivan was running water on one hand and she was making the symbol of water on the other hand. And Helen Keller says it in her own personal experience. It was like a light just went off in her mind. She just finally got it, that this symbol meant this object. That's an unveiling. And she went on to become one of the most celebrated authors of the century. I mean, she could read, she could deliver speeches. She spoke. She was outspoken in women's rights. Anyway, you should read that story, her story. It's a very inspiring story. كما قال سبحانه وتعالى بل كذبوا بما لم يحيطوا به بما لم يحيطوا بعلمه ولما يأتيهم تأويله. See, these people who they don't want to believe in these things. They don't believe. I mean, you've got this whole movement now with Muslims who just know this is all bid'ah. Oh, this is haram. Oh, this is philosophy, haram. Oh, whatever, logic, haram. Everything is haram for them. It has to be tangible. It has to have dalil. It has to have physical, empirical proof. Otherwise, we don't believe in it. And this is what Ghazali is saying. You have to believe in this, because if you don't, I mean, the first step of you at least accepting that this is something that is true, you will be deprived of the joy and the felicity that comes from this experience. بل كذبوا بما لم يحيطوا به بعلمه ولما يأتيهم تأويله. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, rather, they just deny whatever it is that they don't encompass in knowledge. They don't understand it, so okay, it's not true. And whose interpretation does not come to them. The unveiling does not come to them because they themselves close themselves off from this revelation. وَقَوْلُهُ, and he said, وَإِذْ لَمْ يَهْتَدُوا بِهِ فَسَيَقُولُونَ هَذَا إِفْكٌ قَدِيمٌ. You see, when they end up not being guided by this, they don't receive this inspiration, they say, oh, this is mythology. Oh, this is fantasy, this is fiction. These are just old tales. They don't believe in it, so they just disregard it. They just throw it aside. And this is why they're all stuck on this level. Agent intellectual. They can't break free. They can't see the world as it is transforming around them. And they themselves, because they are subjected to the same fitna that everyone else is subjected to, and they're not able to find any sort of psychological soundness because they cannot make sense of it. They can't go through with it. Any mention of such a kind of an experience, oh, this is all haram, this is all whatever, this is all this and that. It's not. False aqidah. Bad aqidah. These people are going to hellfire. This is true. I mean, I've experienced these with certain individuals who have this aura, they have this persona, they have this nur coming from them, this spiritual light, just being in their presence. These kind of individuals, these awliya, they're there. And they have karamat, they have these magnificent, I mean, I don't know. Anyway, we're running short on time, I believe. What's the time? Okay, so we've crossed over the timeline. Okay, let's end here, and inshallah, so next week, inshallah, we'll look at it's an interesting section. It's actually continuing from this. Man talaba wajada, the one who seeks will find, which is also interesting. It's also from the Bible. Ask and ye shall find, or seek and ye shall find. Anyway, let's stop here for tonight, and we'll proceed with, we'll take a break and then resume for questions and answers, a quick discussion. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Jazakallah khairan. See you in a bit, 5 minutes, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين. Okay. Now, questions? Everyone is quiet.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Tim, yes, how are you?
Fine, alhamdulillah. And you, Ustad, and everybody. From your explanation, as I understood, intuition comes from intelligence, intellect. Am I right?
Yes, yes.
So even, I mean, in this case, because there is some condition where just, let's say, as you say, the output, the result of the, let's say, any planning, anything, is just after a second, it comes faster than usual. So it's directly from intelligence, but not the heart.
So the heart in this case, the way it works is intuition is basically, say you learn something. You study a subject or you study a book or something and you learn it. In the first instances, you may require somebody to teach you what it is. That's the tuition now. You're getting a tuition, right? Then you learn it and you practice it. You learn it again and again until that learning now becomes ingrained in you. That's when it turns from tuition into intuition. So and this is what you would call conceptual knowledge. You're mastering a concept of it. See, ultimately you're not mastering the semantics of a thing. You're mastering it, moving from a subjective level to an objective level. You're mastering the concept of it so that whenever a circumstance occurs that falls under that umbrella, you act on it without really giving it any thought. That's intuitiveness now. You act on it without really reacting on it. Without reacting on it, but without really trying to figure out what it is first. That's intuition. The command to act on it, that comes from the heart. The intellect will act intuitively. So like I give the example of brushing your teeth. You don't really think about that. That's an intuitive, it's a rudimentary level, very rudimentary, like a basic task, which is on the lower hierarchy, but it's intuitive. You don't think about it. You don't sit there to try and analyze it. Do I put the toothpaste like this, or what do the brushes do? You don't think about what the bristles will do on your teeth. It's intuitive. You just do it. That's intuition now. From a rudimentary level, it can go up to a higher level. So say you master something like political science or political theory as a subject, you mastered it and you mastered it on a conceptual level. And then something happens in the world of politics. You can give an intuitive interpretation of that without really thinking much about it. To say, oh, okay, because since it's like this and like this is what's going to happen, right? And you would turn out to be correct in that analysis. That's intuitive because you've mastered the concept of it. You've learned it and you've broken out from the agent level to an active level. And so you're able to just give an understanding of it intuitively. That's the kind of knowledge that is already, so intuitive knowledge can come through the mastering of the outward sense, and it can also come through inspiration. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can just put that in you. And this is why some people have abilities in certain areas that other people don't have. And then those people have abilities in certain areas that these people don't have. So an artist, for example, who has a talent for drawing and painting, that person will do it intuitively, does not need to learn how to draw and paint. They're doing it intuitively because Allah has given them that skill. But someone else in this case who doesn't have that talent, that person would have to learn it. Someone would have to teach them, they would have to master it, and then they will be able to do it intuitively. I hope that answered it.
Yeah, thank you very much. What about, let's say, people like necromants who can read from the hand without mastering? So it's like they have ability. For instance, my aunt, when I was 13 years old, she told me the things which could occur, let's say, after 1 year and after even 15 years, which I don't know. Is it some kind of intuition ability, or is it's another level of let's say ability?
It could be, but it falls dangerously in the bracket of fortune telling. So, I mean, there are people who can do that. That's like Al Khadr is one example of that. It's Al Khadr is not the only unique example. There are people in this world who are given this intuitive knowledge by Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and they are able to know things that other people can't know. In the Jewish tradition, although I wouldn't really rely too much on that, but in the Orthodox Jewish tradition, they believe that at any given time there are what do they call them? There's a word for it. I forgot the word for it. They say there are 36 people in the world who have this kind of a knowledge, like Al Khadr. They have this kind of a knowledge that is given to them directly from God, and they are just there to serve and implement that knowledge. Whether they know it or they don't know it, or they understand it, its rationality or not, they just act on this knowledge whenever it comes to them. So there are people who are like that. But again, it's number one, it's hard to distinguish who these people are. They themselves don't know it. They don't know that they have this ability, that Allah gives them this knowledge. And number two, you can have people who sort of mimic that and they become fortune tellers. And they'll employ, this is why it's very difficult, I mean, to really, you'll find many people who go into witchcraft and sorcery, they'll use divine knowledge, they'll use revelation, they'll use ayat from the Quran, they'll use Allah's names, they'll do all these things. And they're actually, performing sorcery, and that's why it falls dangerously in that category. But it's a kind of intuitive knowledge, yes.
And what about the thoughts? How to, let's say, how to explain? Sorry for to get rid of, let's say, thoughts which came up every time, especially while doing salah, performing salah, and because there's some thoughts which came up, so trying to stick, let's say, only imagining, let's say, Kaaba, but the thought every time it's like whispering and thoughts coming out. How to get rid of those kind of thoughts?
Yeah, so the thoughts are, like we said, there are from four distinct sources: lordly sources, angelic sources, demonic sources, and then the volition of the self. And the mind will always wander in any direction. The mind is always active. It's never idle. Even though we use it colloquially to say an idle mind, but it's always active, even when you sleep. The only way to really streamline that is to apply the alchemy that Ghazali is giving, because you need to rationalize those thoughts, first of all, to even distinguish them where they've come from. That's one thing. The other thing is you can't really block it out. The only thing you can do is to train yourself in focus. Focusing and training the mind to function within parameters. And so you've got a broad spectrum of parameters. This is the ordinance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala across the board. And then within these parameters, you've got smaller and smaller units, frameworks of mental operation. So in epistemology, it's necessary to work on a framework when examining a thing. So if you're looking at the human body, let's say you're studying the human body, you have frameworks. You have the physical framework, and you'll study that from physics as a subject. Then you've got the biological framework. You'll study that in bio. Then you've got the chemical framework. So these are individual frameworks. Somebody had asked a question about 5G, I remember. And I said, you have to look at this in its individual frameworks. There's the eschatological framework, then there's the physical framework in terms of physics. Understand it in that. And then these are the parameters. So when you're coming into Salah, the Salah itself has got its parameters. It starts with Allahu Akbar, it ends with Assalamu Alaikum. Those are the parameters. Now, you have to train your mind to operate within those parameters. So when you enter into Salah now, you already block off anything else. This is your mental training. And you focus specifically on what needs to be done. Understanding the ayat that you're going to recite, knowing their meanings, that plays a huge role in helping you focus, because the mind will wander when the symbols it is trying to interpret, it can't interpret because it doesn't have knowledge of that. So you don't have knowledge of the Arabic language, you know the symbols, you know how they sound, you're reciting them, but then the mind doesn't understand them. So the mind will automatically try to look for something else to cling to because the mind is always active. So understanding those ayat plays a huge role in bringing your focus into it because you're giving the mind something to do. And then bodily functions while you're doing salah, you know, where your hands are going to be, how your posture is, you know, like straightening your back while standing or straightening your back while in ruku. Other functions of the body, you know, focusing on those actions also because the body needs to participate to its best because you're standing in the presence of Allah. You don't want to be, you know, you want to sit with respect. There's the adab. So focusing on that also. This is training now. You're training your mind to do that until it becomes an intuitive thing. So in the initial stages, it is difficult. You'll find yourself slipping in and out, and then you bring yourself back to focus. And then halfway through recitation, your mind will go elsewhere, and then you say, focus here. You see? And then it will start becoming intuitive. Yeah.
Jazakallah.
Okay.
As a student. Jazakallah.
No, wa iyak. Inshallah. Yes. Roshan, hand is up.
Assalamu alaikum, Ustad.
Alaikum salam wa
Thank you very
rahmatullah.
much. Thank you very much for this very good lesson on the intellect. I draw some conclusion. I want to know if they're true or not. I'll run it by you. It's a bit long. You talk about the sensory, which is actually the cause and effect coming from the sensory, and then the reality, which is haqiqah, come from the spiritual heart. And then what I have added is to get to the intellect from the spiritual heart. I guess we have to go to the sensory first, and then to the reality. But to get to the reality, we have to go through a purification of the spiritual heart. And to be able to do that, from my own experience, I had to learn the language of the spiritual heart, which come from the language of the Quran itself. So from there, once I get to that point, then I haven't reached the next stage yet, which is to serve Allah as like being aware that Allah is seeing us, our heart, basically, seeing our heart. And if we cannot have that awareness, then know at least that Allah sees our heart. Now, is it how we get to ihsan? This is just very broad and very simple. I'll ask you that question, and then I have two more, then I'll ask later.
Oh. Okay, so ihsan is not a daraja. Ihsan is, it is in parallel with your being. Islam, Iman, and Ihsan are in parallel. So it's like your highway, right? You've got all the lanes. in there. In ihsan, you've got the darajat, you've got the levels. So you are in ihsan even if you are just performing your salah. It's how well you're performing it, or you're aware of it, or you're aware of you performing it. You're always serving Allah whether or not you submit to Him or not, by the way. Even the atheist, even the kafir, even the munafiq, they're still serving Allah in their own way. They're still servants of Allah. And this is why His mercy extends to all of creation. This is why you wonder, if He wanted, He could just wipe them all out. But He still gives them food, He still gives them provision. So they're still servants of Allah. So you're still serving Allah even at the most subsistent level. In terms of the darajat now, that's a different case, rising through the ranks. This is where now the path of tasawwuf goes through these ranks. You can't just reach the top just like that. You go through the levels, what are known as maqamat, and until you reach that. The most subsistent level, the best equation, by the way, I know, is from a poem, أهمها أقاعد ثم الفروع تصوف وآلة بها شروع. The first and foremost is to establish your creedal belief, and because the creedal aspect, your aqaid, those principles, they keep the intellect within the boundaries of thought and intellection. And then ثم الفروع is the practices. So understanding the fiqh and then implementing it. And then tasawwufun, and then purification of the heart and the self and the soul. وَآلَةٌ بِهَا شُرُوعًا. Then you can take an instrument and then take it further. Begin now the journey and take it further. And all of the ulama agree, al-Arabiyyatu miftahul ulum. Arabic is the key to the sciences, to knowledge. And Araba in this case doesn't just mean the Arabic language, but language itself, because one of the older meanings of Araba didn't mean Arab people, it actually meant language. Literal translation, Araba, in one of the older meanings was language, right? And that's what Araba is. Araba enables abara. It enables shifting from one state to another state, a state of ignorance into a state of enlightenment. It allows you to have an unveiling now of reality through language, because you associate the symbol of language to the object you understand, and then you are able to discern from it in reality. Now.
Okay, so from what you said, so Islam and Iman, they all set, they don't change, right? So it's only our perception will change. But Ihsan will change, so we'll go through levels. Right?
Yeah, because your Islam is defined. Yeah, exactly. Because your Islam is defined. Right? Islam is set. There is no change. The Sharia is definitive. It's not whatever. It's definitive. Iman is definitive. The parameters have been given. You've got the pillars of Islam and the pillars of Iman. And then is ihsan, and this is why in the hadith of Jibreel, the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't give a definition of Islam. He didn't give a definition of Iman. But he gave a definition of ihsan to tell you where it starts and then where it goes to. The lowest level and then the highest level of it. Yeah, but it is implemented side by side. So while you're doing your Islam in terms of the 5 pillars, you're also embodying ihsan with it.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one is, I think, the level of the prophets. Did you say that came after the level of the Sufi?
Yes, yeah. The level, no, it's higher than that level, yeah. The higher than that level.
So it's higher. Basically, what you started is you started with a lower level, which is a scholar.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
then you went to the philosopher.
Yeah.
And then you went to the Sufi.
Yeah.
And then finally to the prophet.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, I got it.
No.
Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair.
Mm-hmm. وإياك.
Can you give some guidance how to start with agent to active intelligence?
How to start with agent to active intelligence. So that point, that the line of poetry I just gave, أهمها عقائد ثم الفروع تصوف وآلة بها شروع. Aqaid, furu'u, and then tasawwufun. So the basically your ciencia is something that you want to master first. The science of aqidah, because what does, by the way, a science is not knowledge itself, it's just knowledge of. The science is a facilitator to an understanding. So the science of aqidah facilitates your understanding of aqaid, of the principles or the creeds themselves. And then the science of fiqh enables you to have an understanding of the sharia. So fiqh enables understanding of sharia. And then tasawwufun is now the path of now the self-purification. And it's got multiple sciences within it. But these are the sciences now. Okay, these will enable you to have an understanding by which then you can go and you have a knowledge to probe a higher thought. So for example, if you want to probe an inquiry into what you would call in philosophy fundamental questions, like who am I, where have I come from? If you directly go into probing that in the immediate sense, then the likelihood is you're going to make a lot of blunders. You'll miss it all. Because the fundamentals will help you it will help you build a stepladder whereby you can then probe that inquiry. This is where the conversion now takes place. So the blueprint you could follow is the blueprint of logic. This is why learning logic is it's fundamental. I don't know why they don't teach that anymore. They used to teach this before in our history. It was one of the fundamental sciences to learn. Like Imam al-Ghazali, in fact, he makes that a requisite knowledge. In his Mustasfa, he says that you cannot study fiqh, you can't study usul al-fiqh without logic. In fact, he goes further than that to say that somebody who hasn't studied logic, his knowledge cannot be relied upon for authenticity. Which is a very bold statement, considering I would argue 90% of scholars in the world, 90% of scholars in the world today have not studied logic. You ask any of them, they don't know what logic is. And Imam al-Ghazali says you cannot take their knowledge for authenticity, because the comprehensibility of knowledge and then the articulation of it is facilitated by logic. But the blueprint in this case is following the three steps. So you have 5 questions of probing inquiry into reality. What, how, why, when and where. When and where are related to space and time. These are spatio-temporal questions, space and time, when and where. The other 3 are related to matter. The logos, the ontos, and the telos of things. So the logos is the what question, when you're asking what is it. The ontos is when you're asking what is it really. So if I raise this glass and I ask ma hiya, and then you say tilka hiya zujajatun, this is a glass, right? That's what is it. Now what is it really is a probe into higher inquiry, the nature of the thing, the nature of its existence as a vessel, which is it's a marvelous object if you think about it. It's that sort of thought, that kind of thinking, that's what now activates intelligence. You're now probing an inquiry into the nature of things, into the ontology of a thing. To do what? To understand its teleology, its purpose of existence. Why does it exist? What is its fundamental? This is why you're asking about yourself. Who am I? You're not just asking about the object, you're asking about the nature of your being and the purpose of your existence. You're probing an inquiry into an activated level. This is your activation of intelligence. But don't just go into it blind. You need to have some fundamentals already in place. You need to have a foundation. In epistemology, you need to have foundation of truth, and then you need to have coherency of truth. Foundation is where your source of knowledge is built on. This is why ahammuha aqaidun thumma al-furu'. You're basing it on the sciences that have been established throughout our tradition. So you have a foundation to work with, and then you're looking at coherency of truth. You have a theory in mind, so and so scholar said this, so and so said this, so and so looked at it this way, so and so looked at it this way. This is now academia. You're looking for coherency of truth, somewhere where there is a connection. The more coherency you have, the better your understanding will be. But then you can, from there now, you can advance further and probe an inquiry into the unknown. Next, who's next? Yes, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
What is described as the tariqatul ulama, the path of the scholars, is the tariqat talim, the path of learning. Okay. So you described that this is the path of tuition.
Yes.
Tuition before we reach the level of min al malum ila al majhul, from the known to the unknown. And it is the break from the prophetic path. But you also said that the prophetic learning is different from our learning because it is revelation.
Yeah.
So this path of the scholars, this talim, is it just learning in the sense of education as we know it, or does this also include revelation? Because revelation comes under tasawwuf, and the third thing that he describes is the knowledge of the saints. So how is it different from the two?
It's education not as we know it, but as we knew it. Prior to this whole advent of the modern age, it's education as we knew it before. And that education was always foundationed on revelation. But it was a learning of what is known. The path of the ulama is to know or to learn what has already been known. So if there's a certain ayah that was revealed, the Prophet ﷺ gave an explanation of that, and then the Sahaba followed that. It became an established practice. It was recorded in the books. The later generations will be taught that this is what you're supposed to do, based on this and based on this and based on that, right? So that's the ta'aleem now. You're being given the education. The higher level now is where you as the individual will go into the Quran and into that ayah and then derive an understanding that you're doing it for the first time. You're deriving your own interpretation from it. And this is why you can't do that step unless you've done the previous step. As a principle, as far as revelation is concerned, ta'wil cannot be done until tafsir has been done. You cannot do ta'wil until you've done tafsir. And tafsir is a requisite knowledge. So Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi gives 12 sciences as a requisite before speaking on the Quran from your own perspective. And the first of it is tafsir. You have to look at all the understandings that have already been established before you go into it. So, if you want to study a concept of nur, for example, light, you don't just look at it yourself. You need to study, first of all, what is the concept of light insofar as physicality is concerned, and understand that. And then what is its concept insofar as philosophy is concerned, and then you understand that. Then what is its concept insofar as spirituality is concerned? You understand that. Now you've got 3 different understandings, each one hierarchical. Then you can now go into Ayatul Nur, for example, and try and derive an interpretation to your own understanding of it. That's basically now the higher level of intelligence. Yeah.
Based on something you said earlier, I know a Muslim lady who has had some psychic gifts since she was a very young child. When she was a young girl, she could tell people things like what was written on the inside of their hands, even though it was hidden from her. When she became older, she had gifts like being able to just look at someone and touch their hand, even if they were a stranger, and pinpoint medical conditions or problems with their health. Some have claimed it is related to jinn, but Ruqya has not provided any indications of sihr or jinn association. Are you saying this could be something which is a gift for her? If so, how would she know?
Yeah, that's a very good. That's one of those examples. There are people who have that. There are people who have this ability, and there are people who may not have this ability inherently, but then they develop it later in stages in life. They're able to just look at someone and know about them without really asking any question. They're able to just read their spiritual state, or just by touching them or something, they can have an understanding of them. There are people like that. So it's sort of, you're getting a taste of that sort of knowledge that the prophets are given intuitively. That's what he means. وَإِن لَمْ تَحْصُلُوا بِالذَّوْقِ لَمْ تَحْصُلُوا بِالتَّعْلِيمِ. What you will not get by this taste, this spiritual taste, dhawq, you won't get this from learning from books. It's a kind of knowledge that is there. Now, again, when it comes to something like suspecting the individual for jinn possession, yeah, that's a possibility. And by the way, ruqya is not 100% of a test. There are certain jinn that can evade that. They know how to evade that. They're experienced in that. These are those really powerful demons. You know, they've undergone so many ruqya sessions. They know the tricks and tips. I was at a session once with one of my teachers, and we were just observing. He was not the one doing the session. It was somebody else we had gone to observe. And he was sitting next to me, and the imam, the guy, was doing the ruqya on the patient. And he was doing his recitation and everything, and then somebody among the observers started laughing. So they all looked at him and started telling him, to keep quiet. What are you doing? Why are you behaving like that? Turns out that it was the jinn. He had shifted from this body to that one and started laughing and saying, look at this guy trying to scare me with those words of his. As it was not the words it was the fact that the person who was doing the ruqya was not, didn't actually have a strong iman. You need to have a strong iman and a spiritual state to be able to really, get to those more powerful demons. So it doesn't work like that just for everyone. So someone can do ruqya on somebody and not find any symptoms. And then somebody else might do ruqya and actually find symptoms. It's like a novice doctor and a highly experienced doctor. The novice will not detect those really subtle things, and then the one who's more experienced, more learned, might actually be able to detect that. Anyway. But yes, there are people like that. There are people who are born like that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them. And it's not for us to deny that. That's why he's saying, when it's told to these people, they just say, oh, this is mythology, this is fantasy, this person is psychologically depressed or something, is deluded, this is fantasy. It's there, The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he met some people like that. Ibn Sayyad was an example. The hadith of Ibn Sayyad, he asked Ibn Sayyad, what am I hiding behind me? He put his hand behind him and he said, what am I hiding behind him? And Ibn Sayyad was giving very strange responses, which is one of the things that made him suspect that he was the Dajjal. But that's a person who's on the other side of the spectrum, They've got the ability, or whatever ability it is that we cannot really put into terms, but it's there to have a certain connection with the unseen. But there are individuals like that. Anyway.
I have forgotten to mention in the group to have an extra session for magic, as there are other questions which I needed to be elaborate.
Yeah, I like I said, I leave it to you guys to decide when to have a session like that.
Does deja vu have anything to do with the Mandela effect, collective false memory phenomenon?
Yes and no in this case. So this is why I have a problem with the term. It does, because there are certain things. The Mandela effect is a more of an urbanized concept, but it's there. There are certain things that we tend to remember from our collective childhood. Or everyone will remember something about that thing, and then turns out it wasn't actually that. We sort of, we've been remembering the wrong thing. It's there, yeah, it's there. But there's an issue with that term. That's why I don't want to use it. And I don't like using it. Because it's got to do with both sides. Your state as Banu Adam in Fi Darain in both the realms. Your experiential realm, your experiences in this realm, and then your experiences in the spiritual realm. So there's some things that will happen in this realm that will prompt a sort of sudden awareness in your spiritual side, and then certain things will happen in your spiritual side that will prompt that awareness in your outward world. I mean, one of the effects of that can be examined and as a simple lapse between what the senses pick up and what the mind interprets. So, because the senses have a rate of acquiring information, and that rate has a defined boundary, right? So things that we see or things that we hear have a certain frequency, a range of frequency, and the mind can resonate ever so slightly above that frequency. So there's certain things that you might interpret before your eyes have even seen it, or before your ears have even heard it, so that it gives you this sense of feeling like, oh, I think I've seen this thing before. Like, this is strange, I just saw this. Or you have this sort of phenomenon that you feel like you've actually experienced this before. Those are part of that. So using the term deja vu I don't like that. It's very reductionistic, and it just delineates everything to a simple neurological function. I don't like that at all. It's much more broader than that, and it encompasses all aspects of your experience, material, physical, and spiritual as well. And the spiritual experiences are far much broader than anything material. Anyway, that's a discussion all by itself, and it would be much on a much higher level, much advanced level of discussion. Oh yes, there's a question here. Are akhlaq intuitive knowledge or learned knowledge? That's actually a very good question, because it's a philosophical question actually, by the way. Whoever asked this, who asked this? Was it you? That's a philosophical question, because Plato argues this in the Menos. A man comes to Socrates, who is his friend, and asks him about virtue, and asks him, explain to me where virtue comes from. Is it something that we learn, or is it something that we are already born with it? And so Socrates goes through this mode of questioning, which now becomes what's known as the Socratic method of reasoning, as a very sound methodology of reasoning. And so, and ultimately Plato draws the conclusion from that argument, from that discussion, that virtue is not learned. Virtue is a priori. It comes with you when you are born into this world. And the method of learning now in this case, where you are teaching the child things like manners or discipline, is simply unlocking or reminding them of that knowledge that's already in them. This is where the concept of an a priori knowledge comes from. We already have this in us. Now, from the Islamic perspective, this is verified, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. It's already been proportioned into the self, into the soul. It's a matter of activation. It's a matter of reminding, right? So akhlaq as a collective term are things that you learn them, but they are already in you. The learning is not acquiring something new. It is just something that's being activated as a reminder in you. You are reminding the human being of the truth of the virtue that's already in them. As mankind himself, man is a creation of a goodly nature. Inherently has been created to be good, is a good creation. So you are just activating that. That's essentially what it is. Now, is there another question? I don't know if I saw somebody's hand. Yes, go ahead.
Before I ask my question, the positive thought keeps the body, let's say, energized, and the negative thought keeps, not keeps, but turns the body into
Is breaking off.
so order, for example,
I'm sorry. Could you repeat, because it broke off, the audio cut off.
okay, so the positive thought keeps energized the body. The negative, let's say, it turns the body into self-destruction. So in order to help to my wife to get rid of the fear which is left,
Yes.
I'm using, let's say, the attractive from the documentary which I have seen a long time ago. So alhamdulillah, not now. But I would like to ask you to comment regarding this. Is it okay to use such technique in order, because as you said, to find the proper, let's say, tool, something which could help, let's say, to get rid of a habit or fear or something like that. And actually, also, of course, in the document which I have seen regarding the attraction, it's not like, it's most of the fantasy, but somehow, some kind of, there is a, let's say, possibilities. There's some issues which, let's say, correct, for example.
You're referring to the laws of attraction. Is that?
Yes,
That's
yes,
what it is?
yes.
Yeah. So yeah, some things you will find in there that they're useful, no doubt, they're useful. I mean, a lot of it is based on, it's speculative insofar as the psyche is concerned. There's another book that was written, I don't remember the author, I remember the title of the book, it's called The Secret or something like that, that also employs this concept of the law of attraction. If you have positive things, you'll attract positiveness, and if you have negative thoughts, you'll have, so if you want success, you keep, thinking positively about what it is that you want, ultimately you'll get it. This is a technique that I don't know if they really understand it themselves, but it's a technique that is applied in tricking the self. It's not a technique that's applied in mediating the self. It's a you're tricking yourself into that. So yes, in truth, in a factual sense, positive thoughts will put you in a positive state, given. Negative thoughts will put you in a negative state. That's given. But it's a trickery, because the issue with that is it always sits on the fence and it can fall into ignorance and false bliss. You keep tricking yourself until now you're just deluding yourself to actually what is reality, because reality is not just about positive. You have to deal with the negative also. You can't just keep, putting it aside. You have to deal with that also. So you have to play like a balancing act in the sense. And it can be treated psychologically as well. It's a trickery of the self. And certain psychiatrists, psychologists will use certain techniques to sort of put an individual, like if you're dealing with a patient who's just negative, depressed and all that, you can't treat a person when they're in that state with a hard truth. You need to sort of caress them a little bit. So some trickery is applied to sort of move them from that state, uplift them a little bit, give them a bit of self-esteem until they have a bit of a clarity. Then you can start proper treatment. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. In the Quran, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the more grateful you are, the more He will give you, and the more ungrateful you are, the more suffering you will inflict on yourself. That's now from the Islamic perspective. That's positive thinking in Islam and what negative thinking entails. Positive thinking is shukr, just grateful for your situation, grateful for what He has given you.
Could it be if you learn about magic too quickly before complete foundational knowledge, it could be akin to falling down the rabbit hole? We should be a little cautious. So many students interested in magic.
Yes, because it's a fascinating subject, but yes, you're right. If you try to study that subject, before you have any foundational knowledge, forget the rabbit hole. You're going to you're going to open yourself up to the jinn, and you are not prepared to face them because you can't see them. They will haunt you. They'll take advantage. They love that. You get into witchcraft, and you will, by the way, first of all, you won't even know what's haram and halal because you haven't studied the fiqh, so you don't know what the parameters are or what you should engage in. And then number two, you start getting into, and it is khutuwat, because shaitan, once he sees you taking a path, he will try his best. If you're headed down the wrong path, he'll push you a little further. You see, step by step. You won't realize it. In the initial stages, you might think, oh, you're just reading a theory, or you're just reading about a concept. Next thing you know, you're actually engrossed in it so much that it's occupying your thought and then molding your worldview and then also occupying your dreams. And then that puts you in a vulnerable state spiritually. The jinn will haunt you, and it will make you more susceptible. If somebody puts an evil eye on you, hasad, you will actually contract it faster. It's like somebody who's, you're working with diseases, for example, okay? You haven't studied biology, chemistry, you haven't studied medicine, you've not studied any of the foundational knowledges. You decide, oh, you know what? I'm going to work with viruses and try to fix a cure and find a cure. And you start working with that. Guess what's going to happen? You're actually going to get sick. And it will be detrimental and deadly to you because you don't even know what you're working with. Anyway.
But there's response. There are some questions which give some understanding, for instance, superstition. Are you saying basically that sometimes it's needed?
Oh yeah, you need to have a working knowledge of it. So a working knowledge is different. Yeah, a working knowledge is different from an actual deep thought or deep inquiry into it. Yeah, and this is why you have scholars, right? You've got ulama who do the study and they give you a working knowledge. They'll give you guidelines. They'll tell you don't do this, don't do that, because if you do this, this is going to happen. So that's a working knowledge of something. But going into it yourself, try to study it, and without any foundational knowledge, it's going to be a problem. You don't want to go into that.
Someone mentioned A Secret by some Rhonda Byrne.
Rhonda Byrne, yeah, that's the one. The Secret, that's the book, The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. Apparently got a lot of acclaims and applause, and I read that book. I don't really. It's a joke, really. It's funny. The kind of things that it's like the person wrote a book that just worked for their psychology. They sort of just put together a bunch of things that they like and they don't like, and they said, voila, see, I got success, so here you can get success also.
We could agree that at the very least you shouldn't learn about magic if you don't do your adhkar every day. But complete foundational knowledge is needed, as Ustad stated.
Yeah, first of all, as protection, yes, definitely. Definitely. As protection, don't open any of those books, because the thing is, you're dealing with the unknown and the unseen as far as you are concerned. And that's going to put your mind, because your mind is going to try and formulate constructs. Now, don't forget that you've got external influences that shape the constructs in your mind. If you remember, we spoke about memory and then the medium in which these constructs are delivered, right? So you already have all these films and fantasy books and stuff that build a certain image in your mind. So you're constructing a mental state and you don't have any protection. This is going to play out because it's an unresolved equation in the mind. You've not resolved it. You've not come to the conclusion of what it is that you are studying in this case, about the jinn or what the jinn are doing or what possession is, how it works and all these things. the rationality of it. And there is no, because it's not a rational science. You can't dissect it and prove possession. You see? So you've got an unresolved circumstance in your mind, an epistemological crisis. It's unresolved. So it's going to keep haunting you. And those constructs that are derived from these external influences like film and media, they're going to be projected while you sleep. It's going to give you nightmares. And it will put your soul in a frightened state. Your heart will be in a frightened state. It's going to cause you psychological distress. So you don't want to get into that without any protection. You know? That's why, like that example I gave about when I had that experience with that, you know, the jinn went into somebody else, started laughing. That's an example of it. It's not just about reading the ruqya. You can read the ruqya, but it's really about the spiritual preparation for it. You have to be in a certain state to be able to deal with something like that. The subject that I wanted to write on this subject, and I couldn't put it together in a way that would not haunt people. That's why I wrote the book, The Amulets of Sihr. I wrote it in order to teach the subject, but in a more diluted manner, you know, something that it doesn't hit people with an impact. So I wrote it as a fantasy story, just to, at least the knowledge is expressed out of it. But it's a very heavy subject. Very few scholars have actually been able to break and have an insight into it. On laws of attraction? I don't recommend any book on that. I wouldn't recommend. The law of attraction, this is a pseudoscience. It's not science. It's a pseudoscience. It's just something that, you know, it's a feel-good kind of a thing, a theory. It's not actual psychology. Well, yeah, the alchemy of happiness. There you go. The Kimya as-Sa'ada, that's really the best manual in my view. But now, the law of attraction and all these positive affirmations and all these things, that's feel-good science. That's not real knowledge. That's just something that will make you feel good about yourself when you do it. But it's not going to help you resolve the distresses and the real anguishes. It's just going to mask over it. And I mean, this is what you find. Even our scholars, this is what they do nowadays. It's all about feel good, you know. YouTube is flooded with all these scholars coming in, celebrities, delivering a feel good kind of Islam, you know, 5-minute intervals, convenience store type of Islam. They just make you feel good for the moment. I mean, we talked about it this in the second session, I remember. Abu Zaid he's got it in his text 1,000 years ago. You know, you're going to go to these people and listen to their sermons and whatnot. It's just going to make you feel good about yourself. All these motivational talks and motivational speakers and all these things, this is feel good. Huh? Well, it'll make you feel bad as a repercussion, yeah. Because you'll get a spike of happiness and then it goes down again. Because again, the anguish of the soul cannot be masked. You can't cover it up. You have to deal with it ultimately. And you have to deal with it as it pertains reality, not, you know, law of attraction. I'm sorry. If I offended anyone on that, I'm sorry.
What are the steps one should take in improving oneself and understanding the Quran?
Sorry, come again?
What are the steps one should take in improving
Self in understanding the Quran. The Quran is something that it's not something you can study in one time. Like it's not something you finish and you're done with it. Or you went to 4 years of Darul Ulum and you're done, or you did Alima course or something. The Quran is a lifelong indulgence and can never be encompassed by any one given lifetime. The Quran is a continual thing. And it starts with the first step by default is the language in which it has been sent down. So learning the language plays the fundamental role. on a subsistence level, as far as our ta'aleem, our education in our tradition goes, they used to teach just rote recitation of the Quran. So just how to pronounce the letters and how to pronounce the words so that you could at least recite the Quran. And then on a much higher level, and when I say higher, I'm talking now at the age of 12, 13, is when they started teaching subjects like logic and language and grammar, the trivium that goes with, and rhetoric, sorry. It's grammar and logic, and then language, and then rhetoric. So you have balagha, you have nahwu, and then you've got nahwu and sarf, and then you've got lugha. So that's when they started teaching it at the age of 12 and 13. So that by the time you reach an age of maturity, post-adolescent, you had at least an understanding of the Arabic language. And then comes now all the other sciences that go with it. Tafsir, hadith, ahkam, usuluddin, usulul fiqh, naskh. Naskh is a very important science in the study of the Quran. And then at an advanced level of language now, where you've got more advanced grammar and rhetoric and all that. But it's still a step-by-step thing, going through the steps in this case. And even then, even after you master these sciences, it still doesn't stop there, because you like I said, you can't encompass the Quran in a lifetime. You can't. As I currently stand in my study, I'm currently studying the Quran for the 6th time from scratch. For the 6th time, I'm studying the Quran from scratch. Each ayah, I'm going back through all the sciences in that step, in that order. The language, the tafsir, the rulings, the fiqh. I'm going through all that for the 6th time. And I will attest to this as a witness. I'm learning something new. It's just amazing. Every single time that I've done this, I learn something new. So, you can't, the understanding of the Quran is not a one-time thing. Okay, I've understood, I know what to do now. It's not like that. It's a lifelong thing, and you keep going through these cycles until you pass on. No. Okay, is there any other question, or we can stop for the night, inshallah?
Related to the same question.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's something like it's more in parallel, it's not in sequential. So like if one understands this surf and nahab and balagha, these things, and then in the beginning obviously it's like start with some surah and applying this grammar and trying to translate according to the grammar, like word by word or something. And then is it like take one surah, apply all these sciences that you mentioned and understand something, or take one topic and try to go inside the Quran and find out what are all the ayat related to that topic, and then go inside that, like.
You can do it in multiple ways. You can go surah by surah. You can go ayat sections. You can go through concepts. You can go through, because the Quran it's not like a regular book of literature. The Quran is spread out. You've got many different connections that can be established. So you can look at it this is why you also have different kinds of tafsir. It's not just one kind of tafsir. You have tafsir that are based on the ahkam, tafsir that's based on grammar, tafsir that's only based on logic, on the logic of the Quran, tafsir that's only based on the rhetoric, like Zamakhshari, tafsir that is philosophical, like Fakhruddin al-Razi, tafsir that is based on traditional interpretation, like the ethos, which is like Ibn Kathir, for example. So tafsir that is based on historical accountings, which is like At-Tabari. So you've got many different kinds of tafsir. You've got tafsir based on ahkam, like Qadi Abu Bakr. So there are many ways to, because every rearrangement, this is why it's not a linear text, right? You can't have linear connections. They can be reconfigured in many different ways. There are tafsirs that are based only on the qira'at and the different variations. There are tafsirs that are based only on insofar as what has been accounted in the hadith, like Imam al-Bukhari's Kitab al-Tafsir. So there are many ways you can look at it. But the easiest is to follow what has already been established, like we said. So if you follow a book of tafsir, as someone who is starting out on this, and just follow the book of tafsir. The easiest tafsir is Ibn Kathir, I would say. Actually, in my view, the easiest tafsir you could follow is Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi. Not even Ibn Kathir. Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi's tafsir is really the best because he wrote that tafsir specifically to facilitate an understanding of the Quran. And he wrote it for his son. So he wrote it for somebody at that level. Now, I don't know of any translations of that tafsir. It's in Arabic, so again, understanding at least Arabic language will be required in that. But in that, he also gives you the methodology of studying, understanding the thematic representation of the Quran, how to analyze it this way or that way. So following that is like learning from the scholar directly. And if you have someone who can teach you that tafsir while you're doing it, that's even better. And then no one else, we can end for tonight. Naam wa iyyak.
Tafsir
Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi. He was a scholar from Andalusia. We did the course last year on the sciences of the Quran. They're there, I think, on the YouTube page. We did Surah Al-Kahf, we did Surah Al-Fatiha, and then Surah Al-Kahf. So I was using Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi's tafsir, so you can look at those sessions also. Yeah, Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi. It's called At-Tasheel li-Ulum at-Tanzil. At-Tasheel li-Ulum at-Tanzil. Facilitating or making easy the sciences of the revelation. Okay. Now, let's end here inshallah for tonight. Unless there is anyone else. No? Okay. سبحانك وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين بارك الله فيكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته جزاك الله خيرا and I'll see everyone inshallah next week. السلام عليكم. عليكم السلام ورحمة الله. عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.